My name is Michael Westbrook, and today I'm talking about one of my least favorite things about guitar, and that's playing in tune. Now, I feel like this is one of those things that's a constant struggle, but is super important, and in my opinion, really separates a beginner from a more advanced player. Today, I'm gonna give you at least 5 reasons why your guitar is still not in tune. Before we get into it, do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button. Here on my channel, I'm doing a lot of guitar related content as well as recording content that's kind of focused towards guitars. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, then definitely hit that subscribe button. All right, let's get into it. The first reason that your guitar might not be playing in tune, even after you've tuned it, can have to do with the setup. Now, there's a few different things I want to talk about within this, just to give you a little insight. A lot of people know that you need to have your guitar set up well to, play well and to play in tune. So here are a few aspects of that you should kind of pay attention to. Some of these you can definitely do on your own and you can fix on your own, while others you're definitely going to want to take your guitar to a trained luthier who can have your guitar set up just right so that it plays great. So the first aspect is what I'm just going to call the intonation, and typically this is an adjustment down at the bridge. On electric specifically, we have these saddles that move, and they're basically making sure that the scale for each string is just right. A lot of times how we're going to set this is by checking the tuning at the 12th fret. I'm not going to go super in depth about checking the intonation, but just knowing that the adjustment here is going to make the guitar play in tune all the way up the neck. One way that you can tell that your intonation is out is, say you play something down here on the neck and it sounds good and in tune, but then you go up here and it just sounds out of tune. Now, there can be multiple reasons for that, but making sure that your guitar's intonation is set up right, that the bridge is adjusted correctly, is going to make sure that these notes all play and sound in tune. One thing about this that I see a lot of people miss is that your intonation needs to be set with your action. So if I raise the action on this guitar, then I'm probably going to have to adjust the intonation because I'm pushing the string down further. It's having to travel further, and so that intonation isn't going to be as accurate. So you need to make sure that the action on your guitar is set when the intonation is set, because they will have some effect on each other. This next thing is definitely part of having a guitar set up, but I'm kind of making it its own point because there's a lot to it. And we're talking about the nut on the guitar. So this part right here. There are a lot of aspects about this that can cause your guitar to not play in tune. The first thing that I see that gets overlooked a lot is the nut height. And by the nut height, I mean that basically where the bottom of the string is from there to the fretboard. And this can be, higher or lower. If the nut is too high, then notes that we play on this first fret are going to pull sharp. They're going to pull out of tune. For me, I always notice this on like a C chord where my index finger is here, this C note. If the nut height is too high, then that C is going to be sharp and it's just not going to sound good. Another aspect you might hear that would be on a traditional just E chord like this, that G sharp on your first finger is going to be out of tune. I rarely play that G sharp because this chord just never sounds in tune. That third always sounds weird to me. But whatever the case, having that nut height low enough so that these first fret notes are in tune is definitely key and something that gets overlooked. Now, if our nut height is too low, then we're going to get buzzing. We're going to have issues, with our action, but having it low enough to play these notes in tune, but high enough to not get buzz is the key. Now, another aspect of the nut is having it properly shaped. Especially on a Les Paul, there's quite an angle here. The strings are breaking down here, and they're also going, left and right this way. So having the nut shaped, a lot of times what guys do is they shape it down so that it, as the string breaks over here, that it's going down and it's able to move freely through the nut to the tuning post. If it's not properly shaped, or the spacing where the string passes through isn't wide enough, then your strings are going to bind, they're going to catch, and your guitar is going to go out of tune. Also, something to keep in mind with that is keeping the nut well lubricated. Now, you can do the old school trick of using a pencil, using that graphite from a pencil to color it in. That lubricates it. I also use this stuff right here, Big Ben's nut sauce. It's just like a little, little dropper deal of lubricant that I can put in the nut, and makes everything flow really easily through there. So the strings are passing through and we don't get any binding and we don't have any tuning issues. Again, this is something that's very overlooked and is definitely something you should take to a trained professional. Having somebody who can shape a nut perfectly and get the height right, it's really an art, and you know, it's a huge factor in getting your guitar to play in tune and stay in tune. There are definitely times when I pick up a guitar that I know is properly set up, I know the nut is in good shape, and it still doesn't play in tune. And this is because the strings need to be changed. Old strings on a guitar over time will not stay in tune and won't properly intonate. And for me, this is the biggest way I know that it's time to change my strings. Now, that being said, I've also put on brand new sets of strings that just didn't intonate and were kind of weird, and had to take them immediately off and put on a new set. For this reason, I have started using a slightly more expensive string that I find a little more consistent. Currently, I've been using the D'Addario NYXLs. They're super consistent, and I find from set to set, they always sound great. Now, assuming that your guitar is properly set up, your nut's good to go, you're using fairly new strings, you can still run into tuning issues. And a lot of times it has to do with a player's technique. This is something that I struggle with for a long time and still have to work on, and it's just making sure that I'm not playing too hard. Now, we can play too hard with our right hand by strumming or picking notes too hard, and we can also run into it with our left hand where we're fretting notes too hard and we're pulling the guitar out of tune with our left hand. Now, this is easier or harder to do depending on if you're playing chords or single notes, depending on where you're at on the guitar, if you're up higher or lower, but it's something to be aware of. Just how hard we play the guitar definitely affects the tuning. One way that we can see this is, say you play a note on a tuner, on a really accurate tuner. When you first pick that note, it's going to go sharp and then it's going to come back down into tune. And so just seeing that on the tuner, you can definitely see how playing has an effect on the tuning of the note. Now, this kind of brings me into my next point, and that's bad tuner technique, or just using a bad tuner. I don't know how many times I've seen people tune their guitars, but with really bad tuning technique, and their guitar still isn't in tune. One example of this would be something that I've seen time and time again, and that's tuning a guitar and then putting a capo on, and then wondering why their guitar is not in tune. I've even seen people tune their guitar, put on a capo, realize it's not in tune, take the capo off, tune their guitar again, and then put the capo back on. This is so wrong. Don't do this anymore. Please stop it. Put your capo on, then tune your guitar. The capo affects the tuning, and so you need to make sure that you are tuning with that in mind, right? That, you know, your tuner or your capo is going to slightly pull on those strings. It's going to push them down. Depending on what kind of capo you're using, that's going to be a different type of tension, either more or less tension on the strings, and so you might have to tune more or less, but definitely check your tuning when you're using a capo. Another bad tuning technique that I see is people, they're playing really hard, or they're playing with their normal, firmness with their strumming hand or their left hand, and then they go to tune and they just barely pick the string. They're just barely touching it. And then they go back to playing, like they normally would. And, like we talked about earlier, how hard you strum the string is going to affect how much it's in tune. So you definitely want to, when you're tuning, you want to, firmly play those notes. You want to play them, similar to how you're actually playing your guitar, not just barely touching them to tune and then go to strumming it really hard. Ultimately, think about minimizing the difference between when you're playing and when you're tuning. Every tuner is going to have a different amount of sensitivity to how hard you play and how much you see the note change depending on how hard you play. But you always want to make sure that you're using a high quality tuner. One of my pet peeves for the longest time had to do with these. This is the Boss TU2. And from what I've been able to tell, I think this was one of the first, if not the first pedal tuner, which is great. It mutes and does a decent job. But when you look at the figures on these things, it's plus or minus 3 cents, which is a lot. And that's why I never really liked these. They never sounded in tune. You could tune with this and it just still wasn't in tune. So for that reason, definitely check whatever kind of tuner you're using or whatever kind of tuner you might be looking to buy, see how accurate it is. My personal favorites are the Sonic Research Turbo Tuner and the Peterson Strobo Stomp. Both of those tuners are super accurate. I think they're both within, 0.1 or 0.01 cent of accuracy. And so not only does that make sure that your guitar is going to be the most in tune, but then you can also use it to adjust your intonation if you need to, or whatever. But the old school Boss TU Tune 2 are just not that accurate. I mean, on mine, I actually have written out of tuner because they're just not good. I've also found that to be the case with a lot of phone tuners. They're just not super accurate, or they don't pick up well. So when you are tuning, make sure that you're using a very high quality tuner to make sure that you're in tune as much as you can be. Hopefully some of these things were really helpful for you. I know I had to blaze through some of the ideas and concepts, so if you have any questions, definitely leave me a comment below. Also, check out some of the links in the description. They're Amazon affiliate links, which help support the channel, as well as links to presets and speaker IRs, as well as my new course. It's all about creating and layering guitar parts. All of those things are great resources and good ways to support the channel. That's going to do it for this video. Until next time, I'll see you out there.